Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Happy Thursday. Friday is just a day away. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started. We're missing some people today, but a few people let me know. Some may straggle in, really we probably won't need to go the entire time tonight. The goal is to get you from kind of the preparation stage, understanding kind of how you get from there to the draft, because at the end of this course week, you'll be submitting a draft for me to review. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. We will watch an informative speech example. So this is an example of a formal informative speech that you should mirror, you should duplicate, replicate. We're also going to dissect that because the speaker does some creative things in their speech that we can, like I said, mirror and utilize in our own speeches. So we're going to dissect that, and then we're going to go through a few different speech draft examples and do a little brainstorming, kind of tossing some different ideas out there just to show you, because I hadn't showed you previously, kind of how you can mix and match the different methods and types and org patterns. So in case you need to change your speech at all as you start working on it, I want you to have that flexibility and understand kind of how you can do that. And then there'll be just time for us to do some drafting for you to work on this assignment that's due end of day Sunday. So I like to, if I can, provide time in class for you to focus on getting some of these assignments done, recognizing that when you leave this place, right, life can be chaotic, work can be chaotic, and so I'll give you some time here to be able to make progress on that. And and if you don't need all of that time, then you're welcome to head out. Sound good? All right. So let's again take a look at kind of where we are and what we're working towards. We'll keep the end in mind. So we'll go to content. We are currently Module 2, Week 5. So you completed the Civic Engagement News practice speech, the abbreviated version. So make sure you submit that to Brightspace so you can get that grade. And then this is what we're working on right here, the informative speech outline draft. So we're using the outline template to work from. And the draft submission is not graded based on a rubric. I just like to see the progress you're making and be able to provide you some feedback in case you're not on the right track or maybe missing something. I want to be able to give you that constructive and helpful feedback so you can incorporate that before you submit that for a grade. The points you get for the draft are just for submitting it. So, but the full sentence final version, I'll share with you next week. There's a rubric, and you'll see the rubric. It's on Brightspace, but essentially you can use the rubric as a checklist to make sure you've included everything that you need to include. It is everything that we've been learning about over the course of these few weeks. So that's what we're working towards to kind of prepare us for next week. I want to just kind of go ahead and look at week 6. So next week, we just have a couple quizzes, but we have this Chicago Places practice speech. And because of the size of the class, this may end up taking two class periods. And so it might be like a Thursday and a following Tuesday. But this is the last of our practice speeches. And the goal of this is next week I'll lecture on delivery techniques. I'll also lecture on using visual aids creatively. And again, not necessarily what the textbook covers, but some tips and tricks that I use when I'm designing my visual aids. And so, and with that in mind, I want you to go out and find a place in Chicago. And it doesn't have to be like Chicago city limits. It can be Chicagoland area. Find a landmark, find a location, someplace historic, someplace meaningful to you, perhaps. And the purpose of the speech is to practice using a visual aid. And so I'll have up here, I'll have a presentation remote. And for this assignment specifically, you'll prepare just a short informative speech about the place and have a PowerPoint with just a couple pictures, and you'll practice clicking through those pictures during your presentation. And so that's kind of where our main focus is next week. So next week, Tuesday, we will I'll lecture, and then we may have some time to do some work on it. We'll see. But then Thursday, and then like I said, maybe even Tuesday of the following week, due to the size of the class, we might split up the presentation of that. And again, the goal, this will be the speech where I want you to come up to the lectern and practice, if you haven't already, practice being up here in this space. Because it can be intimidating standing here looking out over everybody. And so I want you to get some practice with that before you have to do it for a grade. And so again, practice speeches, you just get up and say something, you're going to get the points. You submit some kind of outline, speaking notes, you're going to get the points, but the purpose is for you to be able to practice and get some of those butterflies out before doing it for a grade. And also, I find it helpful just in making sure you're familiar with the technology. And so, having a PowerPoint presentation, submitting a PowerPoint presentation, where to submit that, and how to pull it up on the device up here. So we'll talk about all of that next week, but that's kind of where we're headed. So that's our Chicago Places practice. So go ahead and start thinking about some places in the Chicago area that you might like to do. And for this one, it doesn't matter. Some people do the same place. I'm not that picky when it comes to practice speeches. So I often have multiple people do the Cloud Gate or the Bean, or Sears Tower or Willis Tower. So, but it could be a landmark. It could be someplace meaningful for you. A couple of students have done parks in their neighborhood or local buildings in their neighborhood that have meaning to them. So anyway, any questions about that? Chicago Places? It's usually pretty fun, right? You get to share someplace cool that you found, and we are practicing everything else we've done, right? So you're selecting a location. You're going to cite at least one credible source, right? According to the Chicago Tribune, CloudGate's been around since such and such a date, right? So you're going to practice citing a source. You're going to decide on a specific organizational pattern, right? So we're treating this as kind of a miniature version of an informative speech, and of like a full informative speech. And so you'll practice selecting a specific organizational pattern to order your main points. So, and then like I said, the main goal of it is to practice using the visual aid while speaking. So, and clicking through the PowerPoint while speaking. So, getting used to that technology. So let's transition to this informative speech example. So for this example, I would like you to make some notes. So if you have a device, if you have a notebook, this is an opportunity to take some notes because we're going to dissect this speech. So some things that I want you to try to identify as the speaker is speaking is, what is the subject? What is their subject? What is the informative speech type? What method are they using to inform us? Are they defining things, providing historical background, historical context, or synonyms, definitions? Are they describing features of something? And I'll tell you, it's not as easy to identify as you may think because of how they deliver it. Method, and then or pattern. In what order are her main points? And what are her main points? So or pattern, and what are the main points? So let's say main point 1, main point 2, and does she have a main point 3? Do you hear any transitions? Now that I've mentioned this, next I'm going to mention that. So do you hear any transitions? See if you can identify those. And then for her conclusion, what does she have an effective conclusion? Does she have a good, memorable closing? And then what else? Oh, and cue. Squeeze that in. Cue. Does she say a cue? The cue may or may not be in conclusion, but what does she say? So, transitions, and then cue, actually, here, let me actually put that kind of in the order as the, like it is in the outline template. So, transitions. Transitions, and then conclusion. Which includes the cue, review, and I'll just put MC, memorable closing. So does she have those pieces? The part that I've not included on here is the introduction, right? So the introduction is a little bit different. There are some similar elements. Actually, we probably add that. So for the introduction, I didn't have the last class do this, but I think we could say for introduction, does she have a good attention step? Does she build rapport? Does she establish credibility? And then does she preview her main points? So we're wanting to essentially identify every piece of this within this speech. So make sure you have something to take notes on, notes with, and see if you can identify specifically these things. This is kind of the primary part that we're trying to identify, and then transition. So after we watch this video, I'm going to just ask you to tell me, and I'll write on the board what the parts of what these parts are in her speech. Questions about what we're about to do? You ready to take some notes? Listen intently to her speech. All right. So here is a formal, informative speech. So again, this is how you should prepare and then deliver your informative speech. Here we go.
Hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, tsunamis. We're familiar with these natural disasters. But for all the death and destruction they cause, they're minuscule compared to the full force of planet Earth. Beneath our feet are what National Geographic calls sleeping giants that stir occasionally, but will someday wake up and roar with unprecedented force. What are these sleeping giants? In a word, supervolcanoes. Supervolcanoes don't erupt often, but when they do, they transform our world. As a geoscience major, I've been fascinated by supervolcanoes for a long time, but I know even more about them after doing research for this speech. Today, we'll first examine the mechanics of supervolcanoes. Second, we'll examine the way they shape our world. And third, we'll look at a supervolcano that's located right here in the United States. Let's begin with the mechanics. Supervolcanoes are the result of massive magma pools beneath the Earth's surface. Magma consists primarily of molten rock. As a 2014 article in the journal Nature Geoscience explains, magma seeps from deep in the Earth into giant chambers in the Earth's crust, where it cools and hardens. Over time, more magma seeps into the chamber and pushes it towards the surface. Over tens of thousands or even millions of years, enough pressure builds to produce a supervolcano. Scientists have created a scale to measure volcanic eruption. It's called the Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VEI, and it's based on the amount of debris that is released into the atmosphere by an eruption. As seen on this chart from the US Geological Survey website, the VEI consists of an 8-step scale. Each step is 10 times more powerful than the preceding step. A supervolcano is up here, at the top, VEI 8. For comparison, the famous eruption of Mount Vesuvius that buried the ancient Roman city of Pompeii in 79 AD is down here, at VEI 5. A supervolcano eruption would be at least 250 times more powerful than Mount Vesuvius. According to science writer Amanda D'Amato, A supervolcano eruption is like 1,000 atomic bombs going off every second. Now that we understand some of the basics of supervolcanoes, let's take a look at the way they've shaped our world. According to the BBC, scientists have identified 15 supervolcanoes. As you can see from this map, most are located in East Asia, North America, and South America. The telltale sign of an ancient supervolcano is a giant crater known as a caldera. The photo you see here is a caldera that is now Lake Toba in Indonesia. The largest volcanic lake in the world, it was created by a super eruption 75,000 years ago. This aerial view from a NASA satellite gives you a sense of the Toba caldera, which is 18 miles wide and 60 miles long. But supervolcanoes don't just affect the immediate area. According to a report on NPR, the amount of ash propelled into the atmosphere by a supervolcano eruption could darken the sky around the world for so long that temperatures decrease by an average of 20 degrees Fahrenheit. A 2017 study in Nature Communications states that supervolcano eruptions can cause earthquakes, landslides, and tsunamis that last for tens of thousands of years. Fortunately, the likelihood of any of us being around for a super eruption is almost non-existent. The last one occurred in New Zealand 26,500 years ago. But there is a supervolcano right here in the United States. It's responsible for this, which I visited last summer. This is Old Faithful, one of 500 geysers at Yellowstone National Park. The park is also home to hundreds of hydrothermal pools, like the one you see here, which is larger than a football field. The geysers and hydrothermal pools are some of the most beautiful sights above ground at Yellowstone. But things are quite different beneath the surface. What's down there? First, there is a large magma chamber, as shown here in a picture from National Geographic. This chamber contains enough magma to fill the Grand Canyon 11 times over. But second, even though this chamber is huge, it's dwarfed in comparison to a giant magma plume that extends more than 20 miles into the earth. When Yellowstone erupts again, all of this magma will be truly devastating. I say when it erupts again because it has erupted 3 times already. 2.1 million years ago in a large eruption, 1.3 million years ago in a smaller eruption, and 640,000 years ago in a truly massive eruption. According to the U.S. Geological Survey website, this last eruption covered more than half the United States in a layer of ash up to 40 feet deep, from California to the Mississippi River. Geologists agree, it's only a matter of time until Yellowstone erupts again. In this speech, I've tried to inform you about the sleeping giants beneath our feet. Right now, magma is dripping ever so slowly into giant chambers in the earth. One day, perhaps thousands of years from now, another supervolcano will explode again, changing our world forever. But this is no reason for us to be alarmed today. In fact, to me, it's cause for awe at these sleeping giants and what they can do.
All right, so there we go. There is our example. So let's start out. Every time I listen to this, I always pick up on something different. So let's start with subject. All right. Let's say super V or super vol. What type of speech is it? Object, process, event, or concept? I heard part of it. It is object, which is a little confusing. because she has a primary type and then she has some subtypes. Matter of fact, each of her main points are essentially organized around a different type. But the primary object or the primary type is going to be what her subject is about, being supervolcanoes. So object, what method did she use?
Is it describe?
This is why it's a little confusing, because she actually uses definition. She also describes,
Okay.
somewhat of a strict question. She also explains, and she demonstrates. She does it all. And this is a great example of how, again, after this class, I think, this is the way the real world works. You may have a speech where you'll need to do a variety of all of them. In fact, each of her main points is essentially doing a little bit of all of this. And so once you master it, you can mix and match. I would say probably her primary organizational pattern is going to be explain, right? Because she is essentially getting across to us how supervolcanoes work, and kind of going in depth into that, which involves demonstrating the process of how they work, describing how they look, and defining how they operate. So she's doing a little bit of all of that. Were you able to pick up on an organizational pattern?
Topical?
I would say topical, yeah, right, because it wasn't in any kind of chronological order. She could have done supervolcanoes from, throughout time, right, and taken us through, she mentioned it at one point. Matter of fact, when she's talking about Yellowstone, the Yellowstone caldera, she is doing that essentially chronologically, right, sharing with us each time it had erupted. But yeah, the primary organizational pattern would be topical. What would be the first main point?
What they are?
Hmm?
What they are?
What they are, yeah, basically. She used the word mechanics, right? So, but essentially it's what is it, right? Essentially it's a what and how, basically. She also later on used the word basics, the basics of a caldera. What would be the second main point? What did she say was her second main point?
How strong?
What's that? Hmm?
How strong they are?
Actually, yes. She used the word shape the world in her introduction. But that is what she is essentially speaking to, is how powerful they are, right? Yeah. So she could have used that word as well. Yep. And then main point 3. Did you pick up on what the main point 3 was? Yellowstone. Yeah, which was an example. So she gave us a specific example, Yellowstone, which includes Old Faithful. So there we go. So then she, for her mechanics, the basics, she did speak to, what is it, how does it work? She talked about the volcanic explosivity index, right? So kind of explaining how we measure volcanoes. For the basics, or for the shaping of the world, how powerful they are. She talked about how they shaped the world and changed the earth over time. And then she gave that cool example about Old Faithful and Yellowstone. So you can see how her main points, really all 3 main points kind of fall under this topic or this subject of supervolcano. And so that's. Did you pick up on any transition statements? Anything she said that was a transition statement?
She said, now that we understand the basics, we can see how they shape our world.
Exactly, yeah. And that was that was where she used the word basics. It was a very clear transition statement, going from main point 1 to main point 2. I didn't hear of it. Did you hear a clear one from main point 2 to main point 3? I didn't pick up, I haven't, again, I watch this every year a couple times, and I still haven't picked up on what her transition statement is. She just kind of goes right into Old Faithful. So that's kind of my feedback for her, would be a little better transition to that last point. And then for her conclusion, did you catch what her cue was? It was a little different. She didn't say in conclusion. Did you hear what she said?
Something like what we learned?
Hmm?
Something like what we learned today?
Close, yes. She said, in this speech. In this speech. Which, again, in this class, I'm listening for a conclusion. So if you say in this speech, I might miss it. So I would just say, for this class, use in conclusion or in closing, because that's what my ear is listening for. And then her review, she reviewed kind of some of the main points, and then her memorable closing was, the essentially, cause for awe, right? This is something that should be cause for awe. When we go back to the introduction, did she have an effective attention step? Did anything stand out to you about her attention step? Yeah.
I mean, she used natural disasters.
Yeah.
That's really big right now, especially with climate change.
Right, yes, and that's something we can all kind of relate to, right? We all have some concerns about. Yeah, definitely. What else? What else stood out to you? Yeah.
She also said that she was a geoscience major, which was really cool.
Yeah, so she's got some cred, right? She's got some credibility, that ethos, yeah, because of what she studied. What else stood out to you? Yeah.
Kinda how she even like nicknamed the super volcanoes. She called them super giants, and like
Yeah.
there's emphasis on that,
Yes.
and like alluded to them in this mystified way. Like there are these big things underneath us, and they're gonna blow us up. But
I know, right? I mean, she obviously loves super volcanoes, right? I mean, she's definitely a nerd when it comes to super volcanoes. So, but yeah, no, she did. She made them these kind of big, larger than life, exciting things. I'm not that excited about it until I see her speech, right? And see her get excited about it. Anything else stand out to you? Just in her speech, we'll just say in general? Anything else, any other notes you made in regards to her speech?
She was really informed about the subject.
Yeah.
She had a lot of information, even things like you wouldn't think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so what kind of things would you probably not think about?
How long ago, like, the certain eruptions were.
Mm-hmm.
She gave the date, well, not the dates, but the years,
Like the years.
of how long ago it was.
Yeah.
And how she was like, well, it won't happen anytime soon also, just to not
Mhm.
put fear and panic in people.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Anything else stand out to you? Yeah.
I really liked how she did like the in-speech citation like a couple times. I think it was like 3 or 4 times that I heard it in there. But like she was able to transition that in the speech very smoothly. So.
She really did. She did a really good job of that. She, you're talking about the citations, right? Her in-text citations, yeah. I wrote a couple down. U.S. Geological Survey. She started out with a National Geographic citation, Nature Geological Science, Science Reporter, Amanda D'Amato, Nature Communications. So she incorporated a lot of good in-text citations. She probably didn't provide all of what I would want to hear. She didn't necessarily who wasn't Amanda D'Amato, she is a science reporter, but was that for Nature Geoscience? So I didn't quite catch the affiliation or the sponsoring organization in regards to some of those. Or like she said, a report on NPR. Well, when was the report? Who wrote the report? So there were some things in there. But again, when you're doing speeches, in front of other audiences, you don't have to be that. You can do what she did. You don't necessarily be that specific. But for this course, I'll be kind of listening for, who was it? When was it? What are their credentials or their title? So, but the way she incorporated it, because they were a little bit different, it helped it flow very smoothly. So yeah, great point. Any other insights? Anything else stand out to you? Yeah.
No, that's it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I think he compared the eruptions to 1,000 atomic bombs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's what I really
Yeah, that's a very creative and it helps you put into perspective, right? How big it actually might be. So, yeah, awesome. Any others? Any other insights? Did I take any other notes? I think those those were all my notes. So this is what I'm looking for. This type of delivery, right? Kind of smooth, polished. She's got her facts, you know, and again, the way she's designed it, the way this instructor, this presentation is from a specific textbook, and the way that author and professor teaches is a little bit different than how I do it, but still effective. So that's the goal. That is ultimately what we are wanting to get to, and so I want to spend some time doing just a little bit of brainstorming, and this is where this is what was due by at least kind of this part by the start of this week, right? So you have something in mind as far as a topic. And so I want you to work with that, but recognize you may have to adjust it, you may have to modify it, you know, as you go through and start, you know, preparing the speech. And so I wanted to make sure to point out, and I probably have already said this, but I'm making sure I'm incorporating redundancy. I'm trying to incorporate redundancy into my courses. Just a reminder, we want to avoid words that place value on things for our informative speech. For our persuasive speech, we can use more value-laden words, what I call value judgments. And so if we are saying something is important or not important, right, we're saying we're placing a value on that. If we're saying something is good or bad, we are placing a value on it, right? Beneficial or harmful, moral or immoral, right or wrong. So for our informative speech, make sure if you've incorporated any of these words into what you've developed so far, we'll need to make some adjustments, right? So we'll need to change those to something like facts about, right? History of, points, right? We could say, I'm going to share with you 3 points about. So we want to try to keep kind of a neutral position. If we want to get persuasive, again, and some students choose to do this, what you do about your with your informative speech subject is just giving us the facts. But if there's an element that could be persuasive, you could expand on this for your persuasive speech. Essentially use the same subject, but go about it persuasively. So I'm okay with students doing that. Also, if you have, for example, your civic engagement news article, if that's something that resonated with you and you're like, yeah, I think I want to expand on that, you can expand on that for your informative speech. Same thing with the Chicago places. If you want to expand on the Chicago places, it's essentially a mini informative speech. So if you wanted to expand that out, I don't consider that double dipping because these are all practice, right? They're not the formal speeches. So keep that in mind as you're working on your speeches. If you ever want to adjust your speech subject, feel free to. Just make sure you go on to Brightspace and just repost whatever your preparation stage is and make sure it's not duplicate of someone else. So I want to make sure I point that out because as I was going through and looking through some of them, I noticed some of these kind of value judgment based words that we want to remove for the informative speech. And we can insert that back in because we're going to learn how to be effective in our persuasion and speak persuasively using logos, ethos, and pathos, in which case we're going to want to use a lot of value judgment-based words, convincing our audience that something is good or bad, right or wrong, important, not important, harmful for us or beneficial for us. So, for example, if you're sharing with us, if you wanted to share with us the importance of exercise, well, that's good, but for the purposes of an informative speech, maybe just 3 facts about being healthy, right? Or 3 facts about exercise. So you're not necessarily convincing us it's important, you're just giving us the information. So with that in mind, let's take a look at just a couple of examples. Have I shown these examples yet? Triathlon? Okay, I see a lot of, no, okay, it was the other class. We got the other classes that I teach here right after this is a lot smaller, so we get through things a lot more quickly. So here's an example, and I wanted to, actually it's 6:10. You want to take a quick break?
Yes.
All right, let's take a 3-minute break. 6:13, we'll pick back up with this right here. Okay, yeah.
No, it's
All right, so we're gonna just take a look at some examples. So this is possibly where you are at right now, and I want to take us from where you are right now to where you'll want to be by the end of this week. So keep in mind we're building our speech outline as we go. So you've done step 1, and now you're working on step 2. Step 3 essentially is the revision piece. So step 1 is selecting your subject. Step 2 is writing a draft. Step 3 will be incorporating my feedback to improve that draft, and then step 4, submitting a full sentence version. And so I want to demonstrate how I go from here to there. So, and I'll give you some examples of some students who have done this. So, all right. So we have this example about the triathlon. So for this example, if I was doing the informative speech for this class, the direction that I want to go is always to inform for this particular speech, right? So all informative speeches, the goal is to inform. When we get to persuasive speeches, it's to persuade. So when you're working on the outline template, some of my outline templates have, to inform / to persuade. That's because I used to use one template and have everything on there. So just make sure you remove it and that it says to inform. That's what we're working on right now. We'll get to persuasion later. As far as the type of speech, triathlon is an event that happens, right? Method, I'm going to explain how a triathlon works, essentially what the parts of the triathlon are. And I'm going to do it chronologically. I'm going to do it in the order of the events: swimming, cycling, running. And then, has anyone here done a triathlon? Is that the correct order? Swimming, cycling, running? I should have done my research, right? Okay, so that is, I love cycling, so that's kind of the part that always stands out to me. So the 3 events of a triathlon. You see here I have my kind of specific purpose, right? So I want you to give some thought to what are you specifically wanting to inform your audience of, and that will help guide you to your main points, to inform my audience of 3 events in a triathlon. Central idea is essentially restating that the 3 events in a triathlon are, right? So I'm informing you of the 3 events. What are those 3 events? Swimming, cycling, and running. And so with this, especially the specific purpose and central idea, which sometimes I remove the central idea, it's not essential, right? Because if you could actually include the specific purpose, you could say, to inform my audience of 3 events in a triathlon: swimming, cycling, running. That could all be included in the specific purpose. So I've started to remove that since it's not as necessary. The title is a creative way to present that, right? So the true test of endurance, the 3 events in a triathlon. And then my main points, right? So this is an example of a starting point for a particular speech. Let me give you another example of kind of the preparation stage and a different direction that I would go. So this is a speech about Muhammad Ali. The purpose is to inform. I'm going to go about this particular speech treating Muhammad Ali as an object, as a person. So he's pretty tangible as an image, right, as a person. The method is I'm going to provide some background and some historical context. I could go a different direction, right? I could maybe talk about different events that he had in his life. And so then I could, go a little bit different direction, maybe talk chronologically about different events in his life. I could go into his political beliefs, right? And that would be more of a concept. But for him, I'm going to be talking about him as a person and providing some historical context and some background. I'm going to do so topically. And so my specific purpose is to inform my audience of what? What do I want my audience to know when they leave? The accomplishments of Muhammad Ali. Specifically, he was an accomplished boxer, activist, and humanitarian. So now I'm going to creatively present that in my title, The Life of a Legend, 3 accomplishments of Muhammad Ali. And then my main points are him as a boxer. So he was an Olympic gold medalist and world heavyweight champion. He was an activist. He supported civil rights, and he opposed the Vietnam War. And as a humanitarian, he devoted his life after boxing to various charitable causes. So those are my main points, and then just kind of a little bit of insight into some sub-points. So that's a starting point there. From here, we want to go into expanding it into a draft. So you've got the preparation stage. Next, you want to identify your main points. So what are the main points that you are wanting to share with us? And let me pull up. So this is what we're getting to by the end of this week, is you should have an idea what your main points are. You may still be going out and doing some research on your main points, but I want you to also give some thought to, again, once you know your main points, you can more easily prepare your introduction and your conclusion. And keep in mind, we write this body, introduction, conclusion, right? That's the order in which we write speeches. And so I recognize that while we start with the body, you may not have all the information. And I'm not looking for all the information in a draft. You could just have your main points listed, maybe a few subpoints. And so this is an example, and this example is on Brightspace. This is an example of a student. This was a student's draft, informative speech draft. You'll see they don't have the full preparation stage. I am looking for you to have your full preparation stage listed. This was actually from the very first class that I taught, so I didn't have the preparation stage as part of the process, formal part of the process. It wasn't until students came up and said they were having trouble figuring out a direction that I was like, oh, well, there's this whole process that I was taught that actually helps you follow a path to finding that information. So anyway, so you can see that this particular student is talking about 3 places to visit in Orlando. They're going to inform us about the top 3 places in their mind and their opinion, top 3 places to visit in Orlando. So here you see their introduction, their attention step. They use a quote. No matter what fabulous place I visit, I don't feel like I'm on vacation unless I'm dehydrated and covered in sunscreen. Right? They're getting our attention with a creative quote. Right? Her rapport step was, by a show of hands, how many of us have been to Florida? Right? So she's getting some audience participation. Right? And whether we've vacationed in Orlando or not, all of us have at least heard of Orlando. Right? I actually had a friend who thought Orlando was actually Atlanta, and I said, oh, I'm going to Orlando to go to Universal Studios, and they're like, I didn't know there was Universal Studios in Orlando. I was like, yeah, it's been there for a while. And they said, you're talking about the Peach State, right? I was like, no, that's Georgia. And they're like, oh, Atlanta, that's the city I was thinking of. So some people may not know Orlando, and that's fine. That's the point of her speech, was to inform us about these cool things in Orlando. So her credibility step, she does cite, in this draft, she does cite a source, but what is really missing is what is her credibility. Remember, and I'm showing you imperfect examples, because my feedback to her with this particular draft was, why should we listen to you? What's your expertise? And she was from Orlando, Florida, and so I said, put that in your credibility step. You have to answer this subconscious question that the audience is asking, which is, why should I listen to you? What is your credibility? And then the preview step. Today we're going to learn about 3 places: Universal Studios, Walt Disney World, and SeaWorld. So here she's previewing for us those specific main points. Then she goes into those main points, and again, she didn't have it fully thought out. She was still working on it. It was just a draft, and that's okay. So for this, she was thinking Universal Studios. She'd talk about the history. She'd talk about the E.T. adventure and talk about Shrek 4D. You can see then her transition. After hearing what Universal Studios has to offer, it's time we learn how little kids stay entertained in the happiest place on earth, also known as Disney World. And then goes into Disney World history, the Magic Kingdom, and rides. And you can kind of see, and she said rides because she hadn't selected a specific ride yet. So yeah, that's fine. It doesn't have to be fully thought out. Has her next transition statement, and then goes into SeaWorld. the history. So you can kind of see some parallel structure, right? She's talking about history in each one. She's talking about some shows in each one. She's talking about rides in each one. So she's got some parallel structure to her supporting points. And then conclusion. In conclusion, I have identified the top 3 places to visit in Orlando, Florida: Universal Studios, Walt Disney World, and SeaWorld. So again, there's that redundancy. She said it in her preview step, which looks very similar. She then talks to us about each of those main points and then reviews those main points by, again, stating them. And then she has her memorable closing, which is a quote by Walt Disney. So that is a draft. And again, you don't have to have all of this fully thought out, but I would like to see your main points. I would like you to have given some thought to your introduction, some thought to your conclusion. And again, once you have your main points, the preview step and the review step are taken care of. So it's really just kind of thinking through attention, rapport, credibility. What's your expertise with the subject? What's your knowledge, experience with the subject? How are you going to build that psychological rapport with your audience, referencing something that we may all have in common? So give some thought to that. And then for your conclusion, your cues there, your reviews there, already done, give some thought to that memorable closing, right? Some way you can leave us with wow. Start with wow, end with wow. Attention step gets our attention. Memorable closing also kind of rallies our attention. And you can see she has her references there in APA format. So you'll see, I'm not looking for in-text citations. I'm not looking for all the detail that will be in the full sentence version. I'm just looking for some direction to be able to see kind of where the direction that you're going. So that's one example. Another example is the fleece blanket example. And so I share this, and this is also on Brightspace. But again, this is an older version, so it doesn't have the preparation stage. And here she's teaching us how to make a fleece blanket, a no-sew fleece blanket. So her attention step, you'll see all she put, and I'll zoom in here, all she put was personal story about how she came across it. That's fine, right? Later on, she developed and wrote out that personal story. But for the draft, I didn't need all of that. I just needed to know what she was expecting to do with her attention step. And I knew from this, she was going to write out a personal story as part of her final version. Rapport step. Do you want a warm, fuzzy blanket? Right? So getting the audience to be incorporated into the example. Do you also want a blanket you can customize yourself? Right? So asking some questions, hypothetical, we would say questions, right, or rhetorical questions. Not necessarily looking for the audience to answer because that would disrupt your speech, right? So we're asking these questions for our audience to ponder. The credibility step. Here, again, didn't necessarily speak to, until the very last sentence, that credibility. And so why we should listen to her. Again, you can cite other sources as part of your credibility step, but really the point of it is to respond to why the audience should listen to you. And she says, I've been making these blankets for 2 years. And so I told her that she could take out everything before that and just say, I've been making these blankets for 2 years. That's enough credibility. She has experience. Preview step. Today I'm going to show you the steps to making your own comfortable fleece blanket. Measure, cut, tie. So again, listing those main points. Then she goes into the body of the speech, demonstrating that for us. She then transitions to the second main point, demonstrating that for us, transitioning to the third main point and demonstrating that for us. Now this speech was, at that time, for that class, was a 5 to 7 minute speech. So I believe the speeches in this class I shortened them to 3 to 5 because we're a larger class. And so for this, she wasn't meeting the minimum time. And that's not uncommon for demonstration speeches. If you're just demonstrating something for us, sometimes you can do that very quickly. And so I told her, I said, you can actually do kind of like the supervolcano example, and you can actually incorporate some other information, right? You can actually incorporate some explanations and some definitions, right? So for this, even though I don't usually kind of recommend that just as we're learning the process, I said, look, you need to increase time, insert some additional information. So share with us You're explaining how to make this, but explain why. Why are you making them? Where do you give these blankets? She donated them to the Children's Hospital. And so share some stories with us about you donating these blankets to those children. And then she did. She inserted those stories as part of her final version, and you will see that in the speech portfolio examples, because I have her speech portfolio as one of the 2 examples in the course resources. And you'll see how she modified and improved it for her final submission. So then her conclusion. In conclusion, I've shown you 3 steps. My feedback for her was she missed stating what those 3 steps were: measure, cut, and tie. So she needed to insert that, and then she had a memorable closing, which was a little bit persuasive, because she said, you know, I know you want to make one for yourself, which is somewhat like a call to action, which we reserve for persuasive speaking. But again, that's a good example of a draft, right? So we kind of know what her main points are, what some of her subpoints are, and we kind of know the direction that she's going with the introduction and with the conclusion. So those are my examples. So again, this is just the draft, but by the end of a couple of weeks from now, the goal will be to have a full sentence version. And so you can also find in Brightspace an example from me of a full sentence version, informative speech, about a Chicago place. So my example about a Chicago place was a 5 to 7 minute formal speech. That's, again, we're doing, I think, maybe 1 to 3 minute informal speeches just to practice citing a source and using a PowerPoint. So, but my version was essentially as if I would be doing a formal informative speech. And so you can see I have full sentences, I have in-text citations, right? I have things formatted correctly, right? Transitions are italicized, formatting just like in the speech outline template. You know, I have all that there. So if you want to take a look at what the finished product should look like, what I just showed you with Fleece Blanket and Orlando is the stepping stone, right? That's the stepping stone that'll get us to this full sentence version. But the goal is to spend some time working on this draft, making progress towards this. Make sense? Any questions? So let's do some, because we didn't get to do this last class, let's do some brainstorming. And so I want you to just give me, we're just going to go through a couple examples, give me a subject. And then this could be a subject you're thinking of, it could just be one that you've thought of that we just want to experiment with. And we'll kind of go through this, this process of developing a speech, and because I want to show you how we can modify it if you start going a particular direction and you get stuck, how you can make some adjustments to be able to keep moving forward. So let's start with the subject. What's a subject we can start with? Yeah?
The one that I'm thinking about doing is how to read tarot cards.
Tarot cards. How do you spell tarot?
T-A-R-O-T.
Yeah.
T. There's a T. Okay. Tarot cards. Cool. What type of speech would that be?
I have, where is it at? Concept, because it's a belief theory.
Concept. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about tarot cards. What method?
I was thinking demonstrating, but also defining, because I do have to define the certain sections of the card.
Yeah, and that's a good example, right, of how it's not always cut and dry, right? So you're going to do some demonstrating, but also we'll need to define. Yeah, provide some background, historical context. What kind of organizational pattern were you thinking of?
Topical.
Topical. Yeah. Have you thought through main points?
Yeah, I have a few actually.
Okay. What you got?
So the first main point that I want to do is like the 2 main types of cards, so major and minor arcana. And there I would have to be defining exactly what those are.
All right, major, minor, yeah. What's another main point?
Discussing the numbers that are within the tarot cards.
Numbers, yes. Cool. Do you have another one?
And then the symbolism between the artwork within the cards.
Mm-hmm. Artwork and symbols. I love symbols. All right, awesome. Hey, that's a good speech right there. Yeah, so tarot cards as a concept, you're going to demonstrate but also define. You're going to do so topically, and these are 3 topics underneath this subject. So let's play around with it and modify it just for fun. And again, you don't have to go this direction, but this would be, if you start working on this and you're like, I'm not really feeling it, here's how we can make some changes. So let's start with, what if we were to go about it a little bit differently? Instead of a concept, what would be another type we could use?
Process.
Process. Yeah. So if we did a process, what would our method be?
Explain.
I mean, it's still demonstrated.
It is still demonstrate. So for process, you're most often going to be demonstrating how to do it. So the difference between explain and demonstrate, explain is you're talking through how something works, how something functions, but for demonstrate, you're showing us. You're showing us the steps of that process. So you may explain it to us, but we may not be able to leave here and do it. For demonstrate, we should be able to leave here and do it. So if it's a process, chances are you'll be demonstrating it. If I'm going to demonstrate it, what would my org be? What would my org pattern be?
Chronological.
Chronological, right? I'm going to do step 1, step 2, right? Step 3. So then that would change my main points. So my first main point would be, do you know what the first step is in the reading of tarot cards?
You have to cleanse your deck.
What is
Cleanse
it?
your deck.
Your deck? Collect your deck?
No,
Cleanse.
cleanse.
Clean it, got it. Disregard any misspelling. Cleanse your deck. It's been a long day. I started my day at 5, so today was a long day. Cleanse your deck. What would be the second main point?
We're spiritual.
I'm sorry?
What's the second main point?
You have to ask the question. Or
Ask the
like,
question.
or set intention of the card.
Ask the question or set intention. Cool. And then is there a third main point?
Yeah, you have to shuffle the cards until they fall out. There's also another one because you have to build the story.
Okay. So, build the story. Cool, so you get it, right? So this is where, because we chose a different type, that really changed the type of information we're gonna go out and collect, right? Because now we're demonstrating chronologically how to read tarot cards. And so that changes our main points. Awesome, thank you for letting us play around with that. So that's one. What's another subject?
I have one.
You have one, okay?
Yeah, it's actually what I plan on doing my speech on.
Okay, cool.
So I was gonna do the criminalization of black girls within schools.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, let me pull up my stuff, what I have so far.
I mean, that's part of that could also be a persuasive speech, because there's a whole lot of research on the criminalizing of black and brown bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
What type are you going with?
I was going for explain.
Okay. So we're going to explain, which means we're going to talk about the how or the why. So we should see those words in our speech. What method were you thinking of?
I was thinking of cause and effect.
Okay. Cause and effect. Cool, and what organizational pattern?
That's the thing, I don't know yet.
Okay. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Let's do comparative.
Comparative, okay. Comparative, all right. All right, so we are explaining criminalizing of black girls in schools, and we're doing so cause and effect, and we're comparing causes So with comparative, we have to compare one or more things. Are there one or more things that we can compare to each other related to
Yeah,
this?
so I'm doing, a lot of it is like statistic based, so kind of how different disciplinary actions affect black girls as opposed to other races in school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So we could say, so we'll have to kind of massage this a little bit. So we'll have to say, so usually when we're doing cause and effect, as our, wait, sorry, I missed up. Oh. So, method, define, explain, sorry, I got all thrown off here. Like, what's going on? Type. Type is, what did we say type was?
Concept. We skipped
Concept.
it.
We
Yeah.
skipped one. Concept. Sorry. Method is
Explain.
explain. Org is
Cause and effect.
cause and effect. There we go. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, cause and effect. I was like, wait, cause and effect comparative. You could. That's what I was trying to think.
Yeah.
Like kind of like the super volcanoes, how she had multiple.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking mixing and matching or massaging in a comparative with cause and effect, which would be cool and creative. But we'll stick with one, cause and effect. So that means first main point is cause, second main point is effect. And we're going to share the how, let's see, where we explain, so the how and why. So we're going to share the how and why of the causes and effects. So cause and effect, what is a how or a why for the cause?
A how is kind of how disciplinary actions are enforced,
Mm-hmm.
and then the why is like the big isms: racism, sexism.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cool. As far as the effects, and again, we want to also, because this is informative, we want to refrain from negative, harmful, and stick to more neutral language.
Right.
But what would be a how and a why of the effect?
A how and a why for an effect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could say like a how, like because of the cause. So we have disproportionate disciplinary action, so we see a higher percentage of certain demographics in school suspension, being expelled. It even ends up turning into like, oh my gosh, criminal charges, like kids
Yeah.
getting into the juvie system and stuff like that,
Right.
so, yeah.
So we probably don't even need to go into a why, because you've already done a why with the cause. So you don't necessarily have to do a why for the effect. So there we go. So we are talking about criminalizing of black girls in schools as a concept, right? The concept idea is not necessarily, doesn't really fall into the other categories. We're going to explain how or why, and we're going to organize it as cause and effect. So our cause, how this happens, so these disciplinary actions that stem from these isms, right? Racism specifically. And again, I love all, is a weird phrase. I love all the isms. I love learning about and challenging isms. In my area, studying ableism, I look to a lot of work with racism, and so as a foundation. So I love that. Effect. So what are the effects from this cause? So the effects is there's disproportionate enforcement. Young women are entering the JV system when they don't need to or shouldn't be. And so yeah, so again, and you're sticking to the facts. This could also be a persuasive speech where you present it as a cause and effect or a problem solution, and you present to us a solution to solve this. So give that.
That was gonna be like my last point, but
Yeah.
I
So we
wanna,
we
cut it
wanna
off
kind of
there.
cut it off there,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Okay.
just stick to those facts. Great, awesome. Is there any other direction we could go? So a different type, a different method, a different org pattern.
I guess we could definitely do a different type. I could make it like an event. I could focus in on a certain instance of it,
Yeah.
and like coincide that with the overall phenomenon, I guess, like,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, so if you did it as an event, right? How would you, what method would you use? You could use the same one or a different one.
Chronological even, yeah.
Yeah. Yep, so chronologically, you're gonna share with us about this event. what order are your main points gonna be in? Oh, that's what
Oh,
chronologically, sorry.
We did this
I
last
think
time, my
chronologically.
bad.
Uh,
Method could be describe with the event.
Describe, yes. Yeah, we're gonna describe what people saw, what people heard, what people felt,
And then chronological.
and then in that order, yeah, chronologically. So yeah, then your main point one would be what happened first. You know, what happened second, and then what happened third. And you can insert additional commentary if you wanted into those pieces, additional facts, yeah. A prime example, not necessarily related to this, would be I had a student share with us 3 facts or you didn't know about JFK's assassination.
Oh, wow.
And they went through 3, and I actually knew a couple of the facts, but they went through in order. Like so, you know, this was the president decided not to be in an enclosed vehicle. That was 1. You know,
Terrible.
2, the bodyguards were too far away from the vehicle. 3, there was not enough people around to be able to rush in to identify where the shooter was. So like they went through these 3 and they went through in that order. So yeah, so that's kind of another example of an event where you would take us through chronologically how to do that.
That kind of makes me want to do about MLK's assassination. You said
Yeah.
you studied
Mhm.
MLK.
Yeah.
So I recently went down like a rabbit hole where it was talking about like the letter that he got when he was in prison about it telling him like basically to commit suicide and how his family then sued the government and won that lawsuit
Right.
as conspiracy to kill him.
Yeah.
And that's not talked about at all.
Yeah, Uber and the
Just
FBI
drives
did
me
not like
insane.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he was challenging the status quo. Yeah. Cool. Do we want to, oh, it's this time to go. So it's, yeah, we're at the end. So hopefully this helped. Did this help to kind of see the thought process and how you can make some changes? Submit a draft by Sunday. I'll take a look at those next week and give you some feedback. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.